The small figure standing in his doorway shouldn't have been possible. Park Du-yoon's fortress had 17 security checkpoints, armed guards trained in 3 countries, and facial recognition systems that tracked every breath within a half-mile radius. Yet somehow, a 7-year-old girl in a faded blue dress had walked past all of it, clutching a worn teddy bear against her chest like a shield. "Sir." His head of security's voice cracked for the first time in 8 years. "We don't know how she." Du-yoon raised one hand, and the room fell silent. "That's what 15 years of controlling Los Angeles's underworld bought you, the power to stop words with a gesture." He studied the child standing motionless in the marble entryway, her dark skin striking against the cold white stone, her eyes unblinking and serious in a way that children's eyes should never be. She wasn't crying. She wasn't trembling. She was simply waiting. Something ancient stirred in Du-yoon's chest, something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. For a man who'd ordered executions with the same calm he used to order coffee, this small moment of stillness felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. If you're hooked by this impossible encounter, hit that like button, subscribe to Mafia Moonlight Tales, and drop a comment telling me what you think Du-yoon should do next. Your support keeps these stories coming, so don't forget to share this with someone who loves crime family redemption tales. "Remove her." His voice came out flat, automatic, the same tone he'd used 1,000 times before. But when his men moved forward, Du-yoon's hand shot out again. The girl's eyes never left his face. She didn't flinch when he approached, didn't step back when his expensive Italian shoes stopped 3 feet from her scuffed sneakers. Up close, he could see the exhaustion carved into her small features, the way her fingers clutched that teddy bear with desperate strength. "What's your name?" He'd never spoken to a child before. Not in his mansion. Not in 15 years. "Zuri Adebayo." Her voice was clear, practiced, like she'd been preparing for this moment. "I need to find my mama." Du-yoon's jaw tightened. "This isn't a place for children." "I know." Still she didn't move. "That's what Mama said too. She said you were the scariest man in the city. She said your house was where light goes to die." His men shifted behind him, hands moving toward weapons, reading the tension in their boss's spine. They'd seen him kill for less than such words. But Du-yoon found himself frozen, caught in those serious eyes that held no fear of him, only the worse fear of something else. "Then why are you here?" "Because Mama's gone." Zuri's voice cracked just slightly, the first sign of the child beneath the brave facade. "And she said if anything bad ever happened, if she ever disappeared and I was alone, I should find the man with the ice in his heart. She said you owed her." Park Du-yoon had spent his entire adult life building walls. Walls of money, walls of violence, walls of absolute control. He'd banned children from his fortress because they represented everything he'd left behind. Vulnerability, hope, the possibility that the world could be anything other than cold. Now this impossible girl stood in his entryway, holding a teddy bear and a truth he'd spent 15 years denying. He crouched slowly, bringing himself to her eye level for the first time. His guards tensed. Du-yoon never lowered himself for anyone. But Zuri didn't smile at the gesture. She just watched him with that ancient seriousness, waiting for the judgment that would decide her fate. "Your mother worked for me," he said quietly. "Not a question. In the office. She did the books. She said you paid her to make numbers disappear." Zuri paused. "She disappeared 3 days ago." The words hung in the air like smoke. Du-yoon's mind raced through records, faces, the hundreds of people who moved through his organization's machinery. Then he remembered, Amara Adebayo. Brilliant with numbers. Quiet. Invisible by choice. She'd requested extra security clearance 6 months ago. Said she had a daughter who might need protection someday. He'd approved it without asking questions. That was his mistake. "Sir." His second-in-command stepped forward. "The protocol." "The protocol," Du-yoon interrupted, still kneeling before Zuri. "Just changed." He studied the girl's face. The exhaustion, the courage, the desperate hope she was trying so hard to hide. In that moment, Park Du-yoon realized something that terrified him more than any rival gang, any federal investigation, any bullet with his name on it. He couldn't send her away. For the first time since building his empire, since transforming himself from a scared boy into a man who controlled the shadows of an entire city, Park Du-yoon felt completely, utterly out of control. "You're going to stay here," he heard himself say, "until we find your mother." Zuri's chin trembled just once before she locked it down again. "Thank you, Mr. Park." He stood, turning to face his security team. His jaw set with the deadly calm that preceded his most dangerous decisions. "Find out everything about Amara Adebayo's disappearance. Check every contact, every rival, every loose thread in our organization. I want answers in 6 hours." As his men scattered to execute his orders, Du-yoon looked back at the small girl standing in his fortress, the place he'd built to keep innocence out, now breached by the most innocent person imaginable. His mansion had 17 security checkpoints, armed guards, and systems designed to stop armies. They hadn't stopped one 7-year-old with a teddy bear and a mission. And somehow, Park Du-yoon suspected his carefully constructed world would never be the same. The East Wing guest suite hadn't been opened in 4 years. Du-yoon watched as his housekeeper stripped dust covers from furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Her movements quick and nervous. Everyone in the mansion could feel it, the wrongness of a child's presence, like a crack spreading through ice that had seemed unbreakable. "Sir, the room isn't suitable for," Mrs. Chen began. "Make it suitable." Du-yoon's tone left no room for argument. He stood in the doorway as Zuri entered behind him, her small form dwarfed by the vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. She still clutched that teddy bear, her eyes scanning the space with the same serious assessment she'd used on him. "It's very white," she observed quietly. Du-yoon almost smiled. "Almost. Everything in this house is white. Mama says white shows every mistake." Zuri walked to the window, pressing one small hand against the glass. "She says that's why only scared people choose it." The words landed like a knife between his ribs. His second-in-command, Jin-soo, shifted uncomfortably in the hallway. They both knew the girl wasn't wrong. Du-yoon had designed this fortress in whites and grays and cold marble specifically because it showed blood, showed weakness, showed anything that didn't belong. "Your mother is a smart woman," Du-yoon said carefully. "We're going to find her." Zuri turned from the window, and for the first time since arriving, her composure cracked. "You promise." He shouldn't. Park Du-yoon had learned long ago that promises were weapons people used against you. He'd built his empire on the foundation of never owing anyone anything, never giving anyone power over his choices. But he looked at this 7-year-old who'd somehow walked through his security like it was nothing, who'd stood in his entryway without fear, who'd called him the man with ice in his heart, and he found himself kneeling again. "I promise," he heard himself say. The trembling in Zuri's chin stopped. She nodded once, gravely, sealing the contract between them. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. Should I prepare dinner for the young miss?" Du-yoon hadn't considered food. Children ate, didn't they? His mind, so sharp when calculating drug routes or predicting rival movements, went completely blank trying to remember what 7-year-olds consumed. "What do you like to eat?" he asked Zuri. "Mama makes jollof rice. And plantains." Her voice was small now, tired. "But anything is okay. We'll find you jollof rice." He stood, nodding to Mrs. Chen, who fled with visible relief to face the lesser challenge of locating Nigerian cuisine in Los Angeles at midnight. Jin-soo pulled him into the hallway, his voice low and urgent. "Hyung, this is insane. You don't keep children here. You don't make promises to find missing people. You don't." "I don't what?" Du-yoon's voice was deadly quiet. "I don't break my own rules. I just did." "Why?" Jin-soo's confusion was genuine. They'd worked together for 12 years. He'd never seen his boss deviate from protocol. Du-yoon glanced back at Zuri, who'd finally set down her teddy bear and was touching the silk curtains with careful fingers, like she was afraid they'd disappear. "Because she walked through 17 checkpoints to knock on my door," he said quietly. "And she didn't flinch when she saw me. Either she's the bravest person I've ever met, or the most foolish. Either way, I owe her mother a debt." Jin-Soo's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "You're getting soft." "No." Do-yoon straightened his suit jacket, his face returning to its usual mask of cold control. "I'm paying what's owed. Nothing more." But as he walked away, leaving the forbidden guest in his fortress, Park Do-yoon knew he was lying. Do-yoon found Zuri in his office at dawn, curled in the leather chair behind his desk, fast asleep with her teddy bear tucked under her chin. Sunlight cut through the bulletproof windows, turning her into a small shadow against the city waking below. His first instinct was anger. This room was sacred, untouchable. His second instinct, the one that worried him, was to find a blanket. He settled for clearing his throat. Zuri's eyes opened immediately, alert in the way that only children who'd learned to be afraid could manage. She sat up quickly, clutching her bear. "I'm sorry. I was looking for the bathroom and got lost." "The bathroom is 3 doors down from your room." Do-yoon moved to his desk, watching her scramble out of his chair. "You walked past 15 other rooms to get here." She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at the photographs on his wall. Not family pictures, never those, but images of the city's skyline at different times of day. Territorial markers disguised as art. "Mama has a picture like that one," Zuri said, pointing to a shot of downtown at sunset. "She took it from your building. The tall one with the green lights." Do-yoon's attention sharpened. "When?" "Last month. She said she needed to see something beautiful before she did something scary." Zuri's voice was matter-of-fact, reporting intelligence the way her mother must have taught her. "She came home late and wouldn't talk about it. Then 2 weeks ago, strange men started watching our apartment." Jin-Soo entered with coffee and stopped dead, staring at the child standing in their boss's inner sanctum. Do-yoon waved him in. "Describe the men," Do-yoon said to Zuri. She closed her eyes, remembering. "One had a tattoo here." She touched her neck. "A snake eating itself." The other one smoked cigarettes that smelled like cloves. They wore nice suits, but their shoes were old. Do-yoon and Jin-Soo exchanged glances. That level of detail from a 7-year-old was unusual. "Trained. Your mother taught you to notice things," Do-yoon observed. "She said the world was dangerous for people like us. We had to pay attention." Zuri opened her eyes. "She said especially around you. She said you noticed everything." She was right. Do-yoon pulled up his encrypted files, scrolling through employee records until he found Amara Adebayo's profile. The woman staring back from the screen was beautiful in an understated way, with eyes that matched her daughter's. Serious, calculating, missing nothing. But it was her work history that made his blood run cold. "She didn't just do books," he said quietly, reading the annotations only he could access. "She was tracking discrepancies in our shipment records, looking for leaks." Jin-Soo leaned over his shoulder. "She found something. 3 days before she disappeared, she requested a private meeting with me. I was in Seoul. My assistant scheduled it for next week." Do-yoon's jaw clenched. "She never made it." Zuri had gone very still. "The snake tattoo man came the day after Mama tried to call you. I heard her leaving a message. She said she knew who was stealing from you, but she needed protection before she could tell you." "Did you hear the name?" Do-yoon asked, his voice deceptively calm. "She said it was someone close. Someone you trusted." Zuri's fingers tightened on her teddy bear. "That's when she told me about you. About how to find your house if anything happened. She made me memorize the address, the route, everything." Do-yoon studied the child who'd been trained like a tiny soldier, prepared for her mother's disappearance like it was inevitable. Amara Adebayo had been smart enough to know the danger she was in, smart enough to have an escape plan for her daughter, just not smart enough to save herself. The men with the snake tattoo, he said. Did they take your mother? Zuri's voice broke for the first time. I don't know. I came home from school and she was just gone. Duyun stood, his decision already made. Jin-soo, pull surveillance from our downtown building for the last month. Find out what Amara saw. Then find me everyone in our organization with a Ouroboros tattoo. As Jin-soo left, Duyun looked down at Zuri, this small girl who hadn't flinched when facing a crime lord, who'd memorized escape routes at 7 years old, who'd walked through his fortress to demand he honor a debt. Your mother was brave, he said quietly. And so are you. Zuri wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Will being brave help us find her? No, Duyun answered honestly. But it will help us survive what comes next. The first change was so small that Duyun almost missed it. A crayon drawing taped to the refrigerator in the industrial kitchen his chef used. A child's rendering of a house with a yellow sun and 2 stick figures holding hands. One tall, one impossibly small. Mrs. Chen noticed him staring. The young miss asked for paper this morning. I hope that was acceptable. Duyun pulled his eyes away from the drawing. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Children left traces, evidence of softness in a place designed to be hard. By afternoon, Zuri's teddy bear had migrated from her room to the marble table in the main foyer, sitting upright like a small sentry. Duyun walked past it 3 times before finally stopping, studying the worn fur and the missing button eye. His name is Mr. Cuddles, Zuri said from the stairs. She'd changed into clothes Mrs. Chen had procured, a purple sweater that was slightly too large, jeans that had to be rolled at the ankles. Mama gave him to me when I was 3. She said he was braver than any security system. Your mother was wrong. Duyun gestured at his cameras, his armed guards. Security systems don't have feelings to exploit. Is that why you don't have any? Zuri descended the stairs carefully. Feelings, I mean. His men would have been executed for such a question. But she asked it with genuine curiosity, not cruelty, so Duyun found himself answering. Feelings are liabilities in my business. Mama said the same thing about her job. But then she'd come home and cry in the shower where she thought I couldn't hear. Zuri reached the foyer, picking up Mr. Cuddles. I think feelings happen anyway. You just choose where to put them. Before Duyun could respond, Jin-soo appeared with a tablet. We found the surveillance footage. You need to see this. Duyun nodded, then glanced at Zuri. Stay here. She was my mama first, Zuri said quietly. I should know. There was logic in that, however much Duyun wanted to shield her from it. He led her to his office, ignoring Jin-soo's disapproving look. The footage showed Amara entering their downtown office building 4 weeks ago. Her face tense with purpose. What she'd photographed through the window became clear when Jin-soo enhanced the image. A meeting between Duyun's logistics coordinator and members of the Kozlov Bratva, their Russian rivals. Money changing hands. Shipping manifests being exchanged. Lee Min-ho, Duyun said, his voice dropping to Arctic temperatures. He's been with me for 8 years. Not anymore, Jin-soo muttered. Want me to bring him in? Not yet. I want to know who else is involved. Duyun studied the timestamps. Amara saw this and knew exactly what it meant. She was trying to protect us. Zuri had climbed into the chair again, watching the screen with those serious eyes. Is that why the snake man took her? Because she saw the bad people? Yes, Duyun said, because lying to her felt worse than the truth. Will they hurt her? He wanted to say no. Wanted to promise that everything would be fine, that mothers always came home, that the world was anything other than what it was. But Zuri deserved honesty. They'll keep her alive as long as they think she's useful, he said carefully. Which means we have time. Zuri nodded, processing this with the same grave seriousness she approached everything. Then she did something that shattered Duyun's composure completely. She started humming. Soft and low, a melody he didn't recognize, filling his office with sound that had never existed there before. "What is that?" he asked. "A song Mama sings when she's scared. She says music makes the dark smaller." Zuri looked up at him. "You look scared, Mr. Park. So I thought maybe it would help you too." Du-yoon turned away, staring out at his city, at his empire built on silence and control. Behind him, Zuri kept humming, and somewhere in the mansion, Mrs. Chen was probably discovering more crayon drawings, more evidence that his fortress was becoming something else. Something that terrified him more than any rival ever could. Something almost like a home. Lee Min-ho arrived at the mansion at exactly 3 p.m., summoned under the pretense of a routine strategy meeting. Du-yoon watched from his office monitors as his logistics coordinator entered the foyer, pausing when he spotted Mr. Cuddles on the marble table. "Since when do we allow toys in here?" Min-ho asked Jin-soo with a nervous laugh. Jin-soo's expression revealed nothing. "The boss is waiting for you upstairs." Du-yoon had spent the last 6 hours building an airtight case. Bank transfers to offshore accounts. Encrypted communications with Kozlov's lieutenant. Shipping containers that had gone missing, their contents rerouted to Russian distribution networks. Min-ho had been bleeding his organization dry for 18 months, and he'd been brilliant about it. Until Amara Adebayo noticed a pattern in numbers that should have been random. The office door opened. Min-ho entered with the easy confidence of a trusted associate, his smile faltering only when he saw Du-yoon's expression. "Hyung-nim, you wanted to see me?" Du-yoon didn't answer immediately. He pressed a button on his desk, and the wall screen illuminated with Amara's surveillance photos. Min-ho's face went carefully blank. "I'm going to ask you one question," Du-yoon said quietly. "And your answer will determine whether you leave this room alive. Where is Amara Adebayo?" Min-ho's hand moved toward his jacket. Jin-soo's gun was already drawn, aimed at his head. "Don't," Jin-soo said softly. Min-ho froze, then slowly raised his hands. "I don't know what you're talking about. The accountant who discovered your arrangement with the Kozlovs. The woman who disappeared 3 days ago." Du-yoon stood, circling his desk with predatory calm. "The woman whose 7-year-old daughter is currently in my guest room because she has nowhere else to go." Something flickered in Min-ho's eyes. Surprise quickly masked. "There's a child here. Answer the question." "I swear, Hyung-nim, I didn't know she had a daughter." Kozlov said he'd handle the loose end quietly. He never mentioned. The confession hung in the air. Min-ho's face drained of color as he realized what he'd admitted. Du-yoon felt the familiar ice settle over him, the cold calculation that had kept him alive in this business for 15 years. Where did Kozlov take her? "I don't know. He doesn't share details with me, just pays for information." Min-ho's voice cracked. "Please, Hyung-nim, I can fix this. I can get the woman back. Just give me time." "You've had 18 months, Du-yoon interrupted. "You've stolen $3 million from our operations. You've endangered everyone in this organization. And you've made an enemy of a man who never forgives." Min-ho dropped to his knees. "I had debts. The Kozlovs said they'd kill my family if I didn't cooperate. I had no choice. Everyone has choices." Du-yoon nodded to Jin-soo. "Take him to the basement. Find out everything he knows about Kozlov's operation. Every location, every contact, every safe house." As Jin-soo dragged Min-ho toward the door, the traitor's desperate voice echoed back. "What about my family? If Kozlov finds out I talked." "Your family will be protected," Du-yoon said coldly. "Unlike the woman you helped disappear. Unlike her daughter, who walked through my fortress because she had no one else." The door closed. Silence returned to the office, broken only by soft humming from down the hall. Zuri, making the dark smaller with her mother's song. Du-yoon pulled up his encrypted line to his contacts in the Russian district. If Kozlov had Amara, he'd be keeping her somewhere with leverage, somewhere he could control the situation if Du-yoon came looking. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Park. I wondered when you'd call. Victor. Duyun kept his voice level. You have something that belongs to me. The accountant. She's collateral, nothing personal. Your man Minho was sloppy. We're just protecting our investment. Name your price. Victor laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. There is no price, Park. You've been king of this city too long. It's time someone reminded you that empires fall. The line went dead. Duyun sat in the darkness of his office, staring at the surveillance photos of Amara's serious face, seeing echoes of Zuri's brave eyes in every frame. Viktor Kozlov had made a critical mistake. He thought this was about territory, about power, about the usual chess game of criminal enterprise. He didn't understand that Duyun had made a promise to a 7-year-old girl. And Park Duyun always kept his promises, even if it meant burning the entire city down to do it. Zuri found Duyun in the library at midnight, surrounded by maps of the city's Russian district. She stood in the doorway in pajamas that Mrs. Chen had bought, covered in stars and moons, clutching Mr. Cuddles. You should be sleeping, Duyun said without looking up. So should you. She patted across the Persian rug. Mrs. Chen says you haven't slept in 2 days. Mrs. Chen talks too much. Zuri climbed into the chair across from him, studying the maps with careful attention. Are those where the bad people are? Duyun considered lying, then remembered how she'd looked at him when he'd promised honesty. Yes. I'm trying to find where they're keeping your mother. Can I help? You're 7. I'm good at noticing things. Mama said so. Zuri pointed at one of the marked locations. What's that word? Duyun glanced at the Korean notation he'd written. Chango. It means warehouse. Say it again. He did slower this time. Zuri repeated it, her pronunciation clumsy but earnest. Something in his chest loosened at the sound of his language in her voice. Your mother never taught you Korean, he asked. She said she left Korea behind when she came here. She said sometimes you have to forget where you're from to become who you need to be. Zuri traced the characters with one finger. But I think she was sad about it. She had a picture of mountains she kept hidden in her drawer. Duyun knew those mountains. He'd grown up in their shadow, in a village so small it didn't appear on most maps. He'd left at 16 with nothing but anger and ambition, running from poverty and a father who'd drunk himself to death. He'd never looked back either. Why did you leave? Zuri asked, as if reading his thoughts. Because staying would have killed me. The words came out before he could stop them. Korea is beautiful, but beauty doesn't feed hungry children. Is that why you don't have pictures? Because remembering hurts. Duyun looked at this small girl who saw through him with devastating clarity. How did you get so wise? Mama says when you're scared all the time, you learn to understand people fast. It's survival. Zuri picked up his pen, attempting to copy the Korean characters. Will you teach me more words? He should say no. Should send her back to bed, maintain the distance between them. But instead, Duyun found himself pulling over a fresh sheet of paper. This is your name in Korean. He wrote the characters carefully. Juri. It means pearl. Her eyes widened. That's pretty. And this, he continued, writing another name, is mine. Jun. It means path and blessing. Are you a blessing? Zuri asked seriously. No, Duyun said. I'm the path people take when they have no other choice. They spent the next hour like that, Duyun teaching her simple words while she asked questions that cut deeper than any interrogation he'd ever faced. She wanted to know about Seoul, about his childhood, about whether he missed having a family. I don't miss what I never had, he finally said. Zuri looked up from practicing the word for home. Jip. But you have people here. Jin-soo and Mrs. Chen and all the guards. Aren't they family? They're employees. Mrs. Chen cried when she heard about my mama. Jin-soo brought me hot chocolate without being asked. The guard at the gate, the one with the scar. He showed me pictures of his daughter. Zuri's voice was gentle, like she was explaining something obvious. I think maybe you don't know what family looks like. Du-yoon stared at her, this 7-year-old philosopher in star-covered pajamas, and felt something crack in the ice he'd spent years building around himself. Maybe I don't, he admitted quietly. Zuri smiled for the first time since arriving at his fortress. Small and tentative but real. That's okay. Can teach you. Mama always said the best teachers are the ones who need to learn too. She returned to practicing her characters, humming softly while Du-yoon watched her fill the page with careful strokes. Outside, his empire continued its dark work. Inside, a child taught a crime lord that he was more than the violence he controlled. And for the first time in 15 years, Park Du-yoon wondered if his mother had been wrong. Maybe he wasn't just a path. Maybe he could be a home too. The package arrived at dawn, delivered by a courier who disappeared before Du-yoon's guards could question him. Jin-soo brought it to the office, his face grim. It's from Kozlov, he said, setting the small box on Du-yoon's desk. No return address, no note. Du-yoon opened it carefully. Inside was a woman's watch, silver with a cracked face, and a phone that immediately began to ring. He recognized the watch. He'd seen it in Amara's employee file, visible in every photograph. His jaw tightened as he answered the call. Park Du-yoon. Viktor Kozlov's voice was smooth, pleased with himself. I trust you received my gift. If you've hurt her, she's alive. For now. Kozlov laughed. But her continued health depends entirely on your cooperation. I have a proposal. Du-yoon's hand clenched around the watch. I'm listening. Your territory in the ports. Your distribution networks through downtown. Your connections with the Chinese suppliers. Kozlov paused for effect. Sign them over to me, and I'll return the accountant unharmed. You're asking for half my empire. I'm asking for what should have been mine years ago. You've controlled this city long enough, Park. It's time to share. Through the office window, Du-yoon could see the sun rising over Los Angeles, painting his city in shades of gold. Everything he'd built, everything he'd fought for, reduced to a ransom demand. And if I refuse, he asked quietly, then Amara Adebayo becomes another missing person statistic. And her daughter. Kozlov's voice turned poisonous. Yes, I know about the girl. Cute thing, isn't she? 7 years old. I wonder how long she'd survive in my care once her mother is gone. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Du-yoon's vision narrowed to a single point of cold fury. You have 48 hours, Kozlov continued. After that, I start sending pieces of the accountant to your doorstep. And then I come for the child. The line went dead. Du-yoon sat in silence, still gripping Amara's broken watch. Jin-soo watched him with careful eyes, waiting for orders, waiting for the explosion of violence that usually followed such provocations. He knows about Zuri, Du-yoon said finally. Min-ho must have talked before we got to him. Or Kozlov has someone else inside. Jin-soo's expression darkened. We need to move her somewhere safe. Nowhere is safe if Kozlov wants to find her. Footsteps in the hallway made them both turn. Zuri appeared in the doorway, still in her star pajamas, Mr. Cuddles tucked under her arm. Her eyes went immediately to the watch on Du-yoon's desk. That's Mama's, she said, her voice very small. Du-yoon wanted to hide it, to shield her from this evidence of her mother's captivity. But she'd already crossed the room, already picked up the watch with trembling fingers. Is she alive? Zuri asked. Yes. What do they want? Du-yoon exchanged glances with Jin-soo. There was no way to soften this, no way to make it anything other than what it was. They want me to give them my business in exchange for your mother, he said carefully. And they're threatening you to make sure I cooperate. Zuri's fingers tightened on the watch. Will you do it? Give them what they want. It was the question Du-yoon had been asking himself since the call ended. His empire versus one woman's life. His power versus a promise to a child. Everything he'd built versus everything he was becoming. I don't negotiate with threats, he said. So Mama will die. Zuri's voice cracked. Because of your pride. The words hit like bullets. Duyun knelt in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level the way he had that first night. No, he said firmly. Your mother will live. But I won't save her by surrendering to men like Kozlov. I'll save her the only way I know how. How? Zuri whispered. Duyun looked into her serious eyes. This brave child who'd walked through his fortress seeking protection, who'd taught him Korean words and challenged everything he thought he was. By reminding this city exactly who Park Duyun is, he said quietly. And what happens to people who threaten my family? Zuri's eyes widened. Family. Duyun realized what he'd said, the word that had slipped out unbidden. But looking at her tear-stained face, at Amara's broken watch in her small hands, he couldn't take it back. Didn't want to. Family, he confirmed. Now go with Mrs. Chen. Jin-Soo and I have work to do. As Zuri left, clutching her mother's watch like a talisman, Duyun turned to his second-in-command. Call everyone, he said, his voice dropping to the deadly calm that preceded war. It's time to go hunting. Duyun found Zuri in the armory. She stood in the center of the room, surrounded by locked cabinets containing enough weapons to start a small war, staring at her reflection in the polished steel door. She dressed herself carefully that morning. The purple sweater, jeans rolled at the ankles, her mother's broken watch strapped to her tiny wrist. You shouldn't be in here, Duyun said from the doorway. Mrs. Chen said you were leaving. Zuri didn't turn around. To go fight the bad people. Yes. Without saying goodbye. The accusation in her voice was quiet but devastating. Duyun stepped into the room, his tactical gear already in place, guns holstered at his sides. He looked like what he was, a man preparing for violence. I don't say goodbye, he said. It's bad luck. Mama always said goodbye, even when she was just going to work. Zuri finally turned to face him. She said you never know when goodbye might be the last thing someone hears from you. Duyun's jaw tightened. Your mother was right about many things. Then why won't you say it? Because saying goodbye meant acknowledging he might not come back. Because it meant admitting this 7-year-old had become something more than a temporary responsibility. Because it meant feeling, and feeling was the fastest way to die in his business. Zuri. He crouched in front of her the way he always did now. When this is over, when your mother is safe, you'll both leave this place. You'll go somewhere far away where men like me and Kozlov can't find you. You'll forget you were ever here. I don't want to forget. You should. This mansion, this life. It's not for children. It's not for people who deserve better. Duyun reached out, adjusting the watch on her wrist so it wouldn't slide off. I'm going to save your mother because I promised you I would. But after that, you need to let me go. Zuri's eyes filled with tears. Why? Because I have blood on my hands, Juri. The Korean version of her name slipped out, tender and devastating. More blood than you can imagine. And the longer you stay here, the more you'll see what I really am. Not a teacher or a protector. A killer. I already know what you are, Zuri said quietly. Mama told me. She said you were the scariest man in the city, remember? She said your house was where light goes to die. Then you understand. But she also said you were the only person she trusted to keep me safe. Zuri wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She said scary people can still be good people. They just have to choose it every day. Duyun felt something break inside him. Some final wall he'd been maintaining between who he was and who he was becoming. What if I choose wrong? What if keeping you here, letting you see this darkness, ruins something in you that can't be fixed? What if leaving you alone ruins something in you? Zuri countered. Mama said isolation kills people slower than bullets but just as dead. Jin-Soo appeared in the doorway. Hyung, the teams are ready. We need to move. Duyun stood, breaking eye contact with Zuri, trying to rebuild his armor. Stay with Mrs. Chen. Don't leave the safe room until I return. Promise you'll come back, Zuri demanded. I can't promise that. Then promise you'll try. Promise you won't be reckless just because you think you don't matter. Her voice broke. Promise you'll remember that someone is waiting for you. Duyun looked down at the small girl who'd invaded his fortress and dismantled every defense he'd spent 15 years building. She stood there in her too big sweater, wearing her mother's broken watch, refusing to let him disappear into violence without acknowledgement. I promise, he heard himself say. Zuri crossed the space between them and wrapped her arms around his waist, her head barely reaching his chest. Duyun froze, unfamiliar with the gesture, with the trust it represented. Then, carefully, he placed one hand on her head. Goodbye, Juri, he said quietly in Korean. Goodbye, Dunsai, she whispered back, her pronunciation still clumsy but earnest. As he walked toward the door, toward Jin-soo and the waiting war, Duyun felt the weight of her promise sitting next to his guns. Someone was waiting for him. Someone who believed scary people could still be good. He'd never had a reason to survive before. Now he had two. The warehouse in the Russian district burned with methodical precision. Duyun watched from across the street as his teams moved through Kozlov's operation like a surgical blade, cutting away everything the Russian had built in Los Angeles over 5 years. But Kozlov himself wasn't there. And neither was Amara. The accountant was moved yesterday. One of Kozlov's lieutenants gasped, bleeding from a shoulder wound. Victor knew you'd come. He's waiting for you. Jin-soo pressed his gun harder against the man's temple. Where? The shipping yard. Pier 17. The lieutenant's eyes darted to Duyun. He says if you want her, come alone. Otherwise he kills her and disappears. Duyun's phone buzzed. A video message from an unknown number. He opened it to see Amara tied to a chair in what looked like a shipping container, her face bruised but defiant. Kozlov's voice played over the image. 1 hour, Park. Come alone, or I put a bullet in her head and vanish into the wind. You'll never find me, and the girl will spend the rest of her life knowing you chose your pride over her mother. The video ended. Jin-soo was already shaking his head. It's a trap. He'll have 50 men there. I know. Duyun checked his weapons with practiced efficiency. That's why you're going to give me 30 minutes, then bring everyone. Burn every ship, every container, every escape route he has. And if he kills you in those 30 minutes, Duyun met his oldest friend's eyes. Then you make sure Zuri and her mother get somewhere safe. Somewhere far from this city and everything in it. Hyung. That's an order, Jin-soo. Duyun's voice softened slightly. If I don't make it out, someone needs to keep the promise I made. The drive to the shipping yard took 15 minutes. Duyun spent them thinking about Zuri's face when he'd said goodbye, about the weight of her small arms around his waist, about the Korean words she'd practiced with such careful determination. He'd spent 15 years believing he didn't deserve one. Maybe he still didn't. But Zuri and Amara did, and that was enough. The shipping container sat in the center of an empty lot, surrounded by shadows and silence. Duyun approached with his hands visible, knowing Kozlov's snipers were tracking his every movement. Park! Kozlov emerged from behind the container, flanked by armed men. I was beginning to think you wouldn't show. Where is she? Kozlov gestured lazily. 2 men dragged Amara from the container. She looked worse than in the video. Exhausted, terrified, but her eyes sharpened when she saw Duyun. Let her go, Duyun said. This is between us. Is it? Because I think this is about much more. Kozlov smiled. I think this is about a crime lord going soft for a woman and her child. I think this is about you forgetting what you are. I know exactly what I am. Duyun's voice was arctic. The question is whether you do. The first gunshot came from the warehouse roof. Jin-soo, 30 seconds early, taking out the nearest sniper. Then chaos erupted as Duyun's teams poured into the yard from every direction, overwhelming Kozlov's forces with brutal efficiency. Duyun moved through the violence like he was conducting an orchestra, each movement precise and deadly. He'd learned this language long before Korean or English, the language of survival, of controlled fury, of a scared boy who'd transformed himself into something that made grown men flinch. He reached Kozlov as the Russian tried to use Amara as a shield. One shot to the kneecap dropped him. Duyun stood over his rival, gun aimed at his head. "My empire for her life," he said coldly. "That was your offer." Kozlov spat blood. "You'll never stop looking over your shoulder now. Every enemy I have will come for you. Let them." Duyun pulled the trigger. The silence after violence was always the strangest part. Duyun cut Amara's bonds, catching her as she collapsed. "Zuri," she gasped. "Is she safe? Waiting for you?" Duyun helped her stand. "I promised her I'd bring you home." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "You kept your word. Always," Duyun said quietly. "That's what family does." The reunion happened in the East Wing guest suite, in that room of white furniture and silk curtains that had slowly transformed over 10 days. Crayon drawings covered one wall now. Mr. Cuddles sat on the windowsill. Korean language workbook lay open on the desk. Duyun stood in the doorway as Zuri and Amara held each other, both crying, both speaking too fast in a mixture of English and what he now recognized as Yoruba. He started to leave to give them privacy, but Zuri's voice stopped him. "Don't go." He turned to find both of them looking at him, Amara with gratitude, Zuri with something deeper that he didn't have words for. "Thank you," Amara said, her voice raw. "For keeping her safe. For keeping your promise." "I told you," Duyun replied quietly. "That's what family does." Amara's eyes widened slightly at the word, but Zuri just smiled, that same small tentative smile she'd given him in the library. "I taught him that," Zuri announced proudly. "About family. Of course you did, my brave girl." Amara kissed her daughter's forehead, then looked back at Duyun. "We should go. I've already put you in enough danger. If we leave now, before anyone knows we were here." "No." The word came out harder than Duyun intended. He softened his tone. "Faye, both of you. As long as you want. Mr. Park, I appreciate everything you've done, but this isn't a place for children. You said so yourself." Amara's voice held gentle firmness, a mother protecting her child from darkness. "I was wrong." Duyun stepped into the room, his usual confidence wavering. "I built this fortress to keep the world out, to keep myself separate from anything that could make me feel. I thought that was strength." He looked at Zuri, at the 7-year-old philosopher who'd walked through 17 checkpoints to prove him wrong about everything. "But strength isn't isolation," he continued. "It's choosing to protect what matters, even when it makes you vulnerable. It's keeping promises. It's learning that scary people can still be good people if they choose it every day." Zuri's eyes shone with recognition of her own words. "I'm offering you both sanctuary," Duyun said to Amara. "Safety. A home if you want it. No obligations, no debts. Just a place where Zuri can draw on the walls and practice Korean and teach a crime lord that he's more than the blood on his hands." "Duyun Sasai," Zuri added helpfully. "That's what you call him when you're being respectful but also friends." Amara laughed despite everything, despite the bruises and the trauma and the impossibility of this moment. "You taught her Korean." "She taught me about family," Duyun countered. "It seemed like a fair trade." Jin-soo appeared in the hallway, clearing his throat. "Boss, the contractors are here about the renovations you requested." Duyun had called them that morning, while waiting for the assault on the shipping yard. If he survived, he'd decided things would change. "What renovations?" Amara asked. "The East Wing. I'm converting it into proper living quarters." Duyun gestured at the white walls. "With color." Mrs. Chen suggested yellow for hope. Zuri recommended purple. "We compromised on both," Jin-soo added, the corner of his mouth twitching. "It's going to look like a sunset threw up in there." "It's going to look like a home," Duyun corrected quietly. Zuri pulled away from her mother and crossed to him, taking his hand with the same casual trust she'd shown that first night. "Does this mean the no children rule is gone?" "The rule is gone," What about the rule about feelings being liabilities? Duyun looked down at her serious face, at Amara watching them both with careful hope, at the fortress he'd built that was slowly becoming something else entirely. That one too, he admitted. 3 weeks later, the mansion held its first real meal in the dining room that had been designed to intimidate business associates. Zuri sat at the head of the table, explaining her latest crayon masterpiece. Amara laughed at something Mrs. Chen said. Jin-Su argued good-naturedly with the guards about a soccer match. And Duyun sat among them, the crime lord who'd banned children from his fortress, watching a 7-year-old girl teach his entire organization that scary people could choose goodness, that tombs could become homes, that ice could melt if you gave it warmth and time, and a small brave girl with a teddy bear. He caught Zuri's eye across the table. She smiled and said in careful Korean, "Sarangi Dunsei, love you." Duyun had spent 15 years believing he didn't deserve those words. But looking at this impossible family gathered in his fortress, at the light that had finally found its way into the shadows, he allowed himself to believe differently. "Sarangi Juria," he replied softly, and meant it.